Noah Cutter stepped into the ditch before the horse could trample the widow's gate, and the cold creek water climbed over his boots like it meant to keep him there. The rider checked hard. Mud splashed Noah's trousers. Across the bank, Lydia Rowan stood with one hand on the latch, the other on her little girl's shoulder, her jaw set so tight you could almost hear it. The morning smelled of wet earth, mule sweat, and coffee gone bitter on somebody's stove. Behind the rider, a wagon with survey chains and oak stakes waited in the ruts. "You move," the rider said, "or I ride through you." Noah did not move. He only laid one hand on the frightened mule's cheek, spoke low, and the animal quit rolling its eyes. "You can ride through water," he said. "You can ride through mud. You can even ride through your own bad manners. But you won't ride through her. Before we go any further, settle in wherever the evening has found you, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight. There is comfort in knowing how many lights are burning with ours." The rider spat into the ditch. "Orders from the Prairie Crown Cattle Association. This waterline is being surveyed." "Survey the far bank," Lydia said. "This side is mine." She had filed on the quarter section 3 years earlier after her husband died. The deed stayed wrapped in oilcloth like scripture. Everything green on her place came from the ditch Noah had helped deepen. The rider opened his mouth again, then closed it when another horse came down the lane. The second man rode a black gelding and wore town clothes too fine for the road. He was gray at the temples and smiling in the way some men smiled before the blow landed. He looked first at Lydia, then the child, then Noah. And Noah felt the world tilt under him. "Well," the newcomer said softly, "if this isn't Corporal Noah Cutter, risen from the dead and farming under God's broad sky." Lydia turned. "You know him?" Noah could taste iron at the back of his tongue, the same taste he had carried the night he left Virginia. The newcomer tipped his hat to Lydia. "Major Silas Creed, ma'am. Formerly of the Army of the Potomac. Your friend and I served together." "Served?" Noah nearly laughed. Instead, he said, "You're a long way from Virginia." "So are you." Creed's eyes rested on him with lazy pleasure. Funny old world. He dismounted with the stiffness of a man no longer young but still dangerous and looked over Lydia's pasture. "Prairie Crown is buying the creek frontage from here clear down to Crow Creek Station. Folks with small places usually find it easier to sell than suffer." "I'm not selling," Lydia said. Creed smiled as though she had said something charming and childish. "Many people begin there." Elsie Rowan tugged Lydia's sleeve. "Mama, that man talks like the bank." For the first time, Creed's smile changed. Only a little. But Noah saw it. "Children often hear clearly," Creed said. Noah stepped out of the ditch. Water ran from his boots. "You've made your point. Take your men and go." "Oh, I haven't made my point," Creed said. "Not yet. I've only come to admire what you built." His gaze moved past Noah toward the small life that had taken 10 years of silence to assemble. "That all yours?" Creed asked. "No. A pity. Though I suppose a deserter learns not to own much." Lydia went still. Not startled. Still. "It was worse." Noah said, "Leave." Creed chuckled. "This evening. Your place. We should reacquaint ourselves. I'd hate for the territory to learn the man they trust with their ditches and barns ran from the Union Army with a dead lieutenant behind him." Noah's hands curled before he could stop them. He had not killed Lieutenant Bryce. Creed knew that. Truth had always sat too lightly on Silas Creed. Lydia's voice came low and level. "If you're threatening a man on my land, Major, say it plain." Creed tipped his head, only inviting an old soldier to supper. Then he mounted and rode away with his survey men, leaving the gate hanging crooked and the morning broken clean through. Noah fixed the latch because his hands needed work. Lydia said nothing until Elsie went inside. Only then did Lydia ask, "Is it true?" Noah stared at the warped board under his hand. "Parts of what he said are true." "Which parts?" He had faced gunfire with an easier breath than the one he drew then. "I was in the war. I left before it was done." "And the dead lieutenant?" "No," he lifted his eyes at last. "That part belongs to Creed." Lydia studied him with that direct steadiness of hers. Life had worked softness into strength, but kindness remained. "You should have told me," she said. "I know. Are they coming to arrest you?" "I don't know." That was the worst answer, because it was the truest. He had gone west after Appomattox, then farther west after every rumor of old soldiers until he reached Cheyenne, where a man could disappear behind railroad smoke and honest work. He had met Lydia when her windmill blew apart in a spring gale, and he climbed up to fix it. He had not been alone since. That evening Creed came to Noah's place at sundown. He did not bring deputies. Noah did not invite him in. Creed entered anyway. The cabin smelled of pine sap, lamp oil, and venison stew cooling untouched on the stove. Creed set the bottle down. You always did keep yourself clean. I'll say that. What do you want? What every sensible man wants. Profit. Ease. He glanced around. You and I differ only in the polish. Noah leaned against the table to keep from putting his hands on him. You didn't ride 1,000 miles for a speech. No. I rode because Prairie Crown needs the Rowan place, the Bell Tract, and the 2 Norwegian claims by the Bend. Without those signatures, we cannot run the cattle through proper and hold the creek besides. You, however, are liked, trusted, even by the widow. Noah said nothing. Creed smiled. You will persuade them to sell, most particularly Mrs. Rowan. If she refuses, you will tell me where she keeps the deed, and I will solve the matter another way. Noah pushed off the table. Get out. Creed did not blink. Or I call on the sheriff tomorrow with your name and a story every saloon from here to Laramie will enjoy. I need not hang you to ruin you. A whisper will do. Noah stepped close enough to smell the bay rum on Creed's collar. If you touch them, Creed cut in gently. If I touch them? You left 10 years ago because you could not bear what I was willing to do. That was your weakness then. It is your weakness now. For one wild moment, Noah saw himself taking the lamp and smashing it across the man's face. But murder was a short road into the same darkness he had been outrunning since Virginia. Creed lifted the bottle again and headed for the door. 3 days. Convince them. Or I remind the territory who you are. The door shut. The cabin creaked in the wind. Noah stood without moving until the lamp flame settled. Then he took the stew pot off the stove and set it outside for the dogs. He had no appetite left in him. He pulled his old saddlebag from under the bed and began packing by habit more than decision. Bacon, cartridges, the oilskin bundle with Bryce's notebook, a spare shirt. Men who had run long enough learned to make leaving look like any other chore. But when he reached for the canteen, his hand brushed the little wooden horse Elsie had carved badly and given him in June because, as she put it, every barn ought to have one horse made purely for luck. He sat down on the bed with that foolish little carving in his palm and understood what Creed had counted on all along. Not Noah's fear of prison, not even his fear of disgrace. Creed was counting on the old habit of flight, counting on Noah to save the people he loved by abandoning them before the first shot. It had worked once. It would work forever if Noah let it. So he unpacked the bag, set the wooden horse on the shelf above the stove, and stayed. The next morning he rode fence lines for the Bell brothers before sunrise, trying to think his way out of betrayal. By noon the rumor had started anyway. He heard it in Harker's General Store when talk stopped too late as he entered. Even Sheriff Dulock's extra politeness told him the matter had spread. When Noah returned, Lydia was on her porch mending a harness trace, each stitch pulled tight as a wound. Did you start it? She asked without looking up. No. Did he? Yes. She nodded once. I figured. He took off his hat. Lydia, listen to me. Creed wants your land. Mine too. If I had any worth stealing. He'll use whatever he can. Then tell me the whole thing. He should have. He knew it, even as silence climbed into his throat. I left because staying made me less than I wanted to be, he said. Her hands stilled on the leather. That is not the whole thing. No. She set the harness down. Then I can't build on half a truth. Those words landed harder than accusation. Elsie came out with a tin cup and sensed the sharpness at once. Noah crouched to her height. You mind your mama, all right? She asked, are you going away? He could not answer fast enough, and she knew. That evening Lydia barred her door before dusk. Word kept spreading. At church social the next night, men spoke lower when Noah came near, and women who had once asked him to mend porch rails studied their hymn books instead. Only Mrs. Bell pressed a plate of molasses cake into his hand and muttered, whatever you were, you've been useful since. At the pump behind the schoolhouse, Nelson, the older Norwegian, knocked ice from the handle and said, a bad man likes a secret better than a rope. Best not give him one. Those were small kindnesses, but small kindnesses can keep a soul from tipping clean over. Noah went to sleep that night knowing two things at once. The town was afraid of him now, and some of them were afraid for him as well. On the second day, Creed's men cut Bell's north fence. On the third, they rode too close to the schoolhouse yard. Nothing loud enough for court. Nothing small enough to ignore. The town began to bend. Men who had sworn never to sell started speaking of terms. Noah helped where he could, but it became clear there was no fixing this with his hands alone. Late on the third afternoon, he found Lydia by the creek, boots muddy, skirts pinned up, shoveling silt from the headgate with a fury that made her look younger and far more dangerous. "I can do that," he said. "I know." He stepped into the ditch beside her anyway. Finally, Lydia said, "He came by this morning. Told me to distance myself from you. Looked at my daughter too long." Noah said, "I'm sorry." She gave him a sharp glance. "I'm not telling you so you can apologize. I'm telling you because I'm tired of men who think fear is authority. If you were there at that moment, tell me true in the comments. If a bad man held your future in one hand and the people you loved in the other, would you tell the full truth and risk losing everything now? Or keep quiet one day longer and hope you could still protect them?" Noah set his shovel aside. "There's more. And if I don't say it now, I never will." He told her about winter camp in the Shenandoah, about Creed skimming pay from dead men, about Lieutenant Bryce threatening to report it, and about the farmhouse near Cedar Creek where Creed ordered a barn fired with a child still inside. "We broke ranks," Noah said. Aaron got the door open. Bryce came round yelling for Creed to stop. When it was done, the woman and boy were out. Aaron was dead. Bryce was dead. Creed said rebels had done it. There were no rebels. That night, I took Aaron's Bible and Bryce's notebook and rode. After a week on the road, I cared more about not being found than I did about justice. Lydia's eyes had not left his face. "And the notebook?" "In my cabin, wrapped in oilskin behind the stove stones." "Why keep it?" "Because if I threw it away, then he'd have been right about all of it." Lydia's expression steadied. "You should have told me sooner." "I know, but I'm glad you told me now." It lasted all of 20 seconds. A crack split the air from up the lane. Then another. Gunfire. Lydia dropped the shovel. "Elsie." They ran. The barn was already smoking when they reached the yard. One of Creed's riders tore away from the corral on a sorrel horse. Another was kicking at the chicken run. Noah grabbed the water barrel dipper and flung it at the second man's face hard enough to spin him. Lydia snatched the rake by the steps and drove the handle straight into his ribs with a force born of terror and practice. Then Elsie screamed from inside the barn loft. Everything narrowed. Noah plunged through the smoke. Heat hit him like a wall. A lantern had been smashed in the hay by the ladder. The mare in the near stall was frantic. "Elsie," he shouted. "Up here." He heard her coughing. He slashed the mare loose first, then took the ladder 2 rungs at a time. Elsie had crawled behind the hay chute. He wrapped her in a blanket and came down with flames chasing them. Outside, Lydia met them on her knees in the dirt. She took Elsie, checking hands, face, hair, whispering until the child's sobs found breath enough to answer. Noah turned back for the notebook. Lydia caught his sleeve. "No, I need it. You'll die for paper. For the only thing that ever had his true name on it." Before she could stop him, he went in again. Smoke had already blown under the porch eaves. Creed stood there with one gloved hand on the doorframe. "You always were predictable," he said. Creed lifted the Colt. "Bring me the notebook." Behind him came the small click of a hammer being thumbed back. Lydia's voice said, "Tell him to drop it, Noah." She had gone through the back window and taken Creed from behind. Creed's eyes hardened. "Mrs. Rowan, you do not understand the terms of this conversation. I understand a man who sets fire where a child sleeps." Noah moved one careful step. "It's over, Creed. But bad men do not yield because decency asks them to. They yield only when every road out is taken." Creed shifted, quick as a striking snake. Gunshot. Splintered doorframe. Lydia cried out. Noah hit him low. They went off the porch together into the dust, the pistol skidding under the step. Creed was older, but means strength keeps well. He drove an elbow into Noah's jaw, found his throat, squeezed. Noah saw Lydia on one knee, blood on her sleeve, reaching for the dropped rake handle. Then Creed's hand went for the boot knife. And the chapter of Noah Cutter's life that had been ruled by running came down to one clear choice: flee again into darkness, or finish something at terrible cost. He chose. Noah trapped Creed's knife wrist with both hands and slammed it once against the porch step, twice against the post, until the blade dropped into the dirt. Lydia was there a heartbeat later. The rake handle cracked across Creed's shoulder. He cursed, lurched free, and stumbled backward into the yard. The black gelding came skittering past, wild-eyed from smoke. Creed caught the saddle horn and hauled himself up one-handed. "Tomorrow," he rasped, blood bright on his teeth. "You'll wish you had kept riding, Cutter." Then he spurred away into the dark with the burning barn behind him and every decent thing in Noah begging not to waste another year afraid. They saved the house and 2 stalls of the barn. By midnight the fire was red coals and wet ash. Elsie slept at Mrs. Bell's place. Noah sat on Lydia's kitchen floor while she stitched the grays along her arm with a steadier hand than his own. Noah laid Lieutenant Bryce's notebook beside the lamp. The pages held crossed-out pay names, altered amounts, and one entry written 3 days before the farmhouse fire. "If anything happens to me, Major Creed is to be examined for theft of widow pensions and field pay." "So he was stealing from the dead and from the women waiting on them," she said. "Yes." She closed the book gently. "Then tomorrow he loses more than an argument." Noah said, "You ought to take Elsie and go to your sisters in Laramie." "No. He'll come back meaner." "I know." At that Lydia gave him a tired, fierce look. "I buried one man who spent his life dodging hard truth. I won't watch a better man do the same." He looked down. Her voice softened. "A person can live a long time on scraps of kindness if that's all the world serves him. Doesn't mean scraps are all he's worth." He said, rough as gravel, "I kept thinking running was the price." Lydia set the needle aside. "Fear pays nobody's debt. Truth might." He laughed softly. "That sounds fit to carve over a courthouse." "No. Courthouses don't deserve it." He reached for her. She let him take her hand, and when she leaned her forehead against his, nothing in the room moved but the lamp flame. After a while Lydia said, very quietly, "My husband never learned that staying and standing are not the same thing. He stayed on this land, but every hard season found him turned half away from it, looking for a card game, a shortcut, a promise with brighter paint. I buried him and mourned him, and still there were days I was angrier than I was sad." Noah listened without moving. "I thought that made me hard," she said. "Then you came along and fixed things without making a speech about it. A hinge, a trough, a windmill, Elsie's toy wagon. I kept waiting for the part where you asked to be admired. And you never did." Her mouth trembled into the ghost of a smile. "That is a dangerous comfort, Noah." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to the knuckles scarred by work and weather. "I don't want admiration. What do you want?" The answer came out before fear could stop it. "A place at your table when the work is done." Lydia closed her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them again, all the walls between them were still there, but the door in the middle stood open. She kissed him once, softly, as if testing whether hope could be trusted, and when she drew back her fingers stayed curled in his shirt. If this story is moving you tonight, you are exactly who it was written for. A like and a subscribe tell us to keep bringing these home to you. At dawn Noah rode to town with the notebook inside his coat. He rang the bell outside the schoolhouse until doors opened all along the street. Lydia arrived with Elsie's hand in hers, and ash still on her sleeve. Noah stood on the steps. "My name is Noah Cutter. 10 years ago I deserted the Union Army after my commanding officer, Silas Creed, murdered honest men and burned a civilian farm to cover his theft. I ran because I was afraid no one would believe a corporal over a major." He drew out the notebook. "He found me here because he wants creek land he didn't earn. Last night, he set Mrs. Rowan's barn afire. I have made 3 copies of this book. One is already on the morning train. One goes by telegraph to Fort Laramie. This is the 3rd. Now the murmur broke loud. Mrs. Bell went to stand beside Lydia without asking permission. Harker, who had sold Creed cigars all week with a bow, looked sick clear through. Old Jonas Pike spat in the dust and said, "I knew I disliked him for a reason." Noah raised a hand for quiet. "You don't have to forgive what I was. But you ought to know this much. I never ran because I was afraid to fight. I ran because I had already seen what happens when decent men keep their mouths shut while a cruel one calls it order. I won't do that again." The Bell brothers stepped up on either side of the schoolhouse steps. Nelson came too, broad as a gatepost, hat in both hands. Lydia climbed one step and stood where everyone in town could see her next to him. "He told me the truth before dawn," she said. "And truth told at cost is worth more than any smooth lie sold cheap. This land stays with the families who worked it." Something changed then. You could hear it in the breathing, in the scrape of boots, in the way fear stopped being private and turned communal. By the time Creed arrived, He was not riding into a frightened street. He was riding into a street that had chosen a side. Creed came hard with two men behind him, his hat low, his shoulder bandaged under the coat, his smile all gone. "Sheriff," he called, "take that man. He's a deserter and arsonist trying to smear respectable investors." Duloc did not move. "Funny thing about respectable investors, Major. They don't usually fire barns with children in them." Creed's gaze snapped to Lydia. "You sent word?" "I keep records," she said. "That includes men who threaten my child." He saw it then. The town. The copy's gone beyond his reach. The blackmail, spent like a cartridge, already fired. That was when Silas Creed made the mistake proud men always make. He reached for the gun because the room had stopped obeying him. Noah was already moving. He came off the schoolhouse steps fast and low, not toward the barrel but toward the horse. One slap to the bridle, one sharp shout, and Creed's gelding sidestepped hard. The shot went wild through the signboard over Harker's store. Sheriff Duloc seized Creed's wrist. Bell and Nelson took the other arm. By noon, the search of his hotel room turned up forged purchase contracts, bribery notes, and altered survey maps. Within a week, his accounts were frozen, his investors gone, and his name printed in the territorial paper beside the words fraud, arson, and murder inquiry. As for Noah, he rode with Sheriff Duloc to give his statement and came back the next day not in chains but in dust. Creed was too thoroughly damned for anyone to care much about punishing the man who had finally told the truth. The creek stayed with the families who had worked it. Bell replanted the barley. The Norwegians stayed. Lydia rebuilt the barn bigger because she said once you've lost a thing to meanness, the only proper reply is to build it back stubborn. That autumn, under a sky so clear it looked washed, Noah asked if she would have him properly, with all of him known and none of him hidden. Lydia smiled in that small, grave way of hers and said, "I was hoping you'd get around to the hard part." Months later, after the first snow and before lambing, Reverend Sloane signed the register while Elsie stood between them in boots too big and grinned like she had arranged the whole affair. When the vows were done, Lydia touched the scar in Noah's palm and held on. By the next summer, the new barn smelled of sweet hay and fresh-cut pine, and the alfalfa along the ditch came in thick and green. At sundown, Lydia would read on the porch while Elsie shelled peas into her apron and Noah mended whatever the day had worn thin. Noah sometimes thought a man could spend half his life trying to outrun his name, only to learn that home is the place where someone speaks it gently and means stay. In the yard below, the creek he had once defended from a boot heel kept shining west through the rows like a ribbon of hammered silver. Next time, stay with us for the story of the railroad widow who hired a one-eyed horse thief to escort her across the Dakotas, only to discover the man had been carrying her husband's last letter for 6 years.